The panic about Crimea is spreading more and more among Russian commentators. After further heavy Ukrainian attacks, civilians are now no longer receiving fuel, and the ferry service is also being suspended. Effectively, Crimea is now under Ukrainian siege. Meanwhile, some Russian military bloggers are seriously discussing whether Ukraine could invade Belarus. All this in this situation report on the war in Ukraine. Ukraine has once again carried out heavy attacks on the Russian hinterland. On the night of the 21st, attacks mainly took place on Crimea. The focus was on the Kerch Strait, especially the port, the ferries, the ferry facilities, and the adjacent oil and railway infrastructure. Air defense systems, radar equipment, and gas compressors for gas pipelines were also attacked. Explosions were also reported from numerous cities on the peninsula. It's still unclear whether these were caused by direct hits or by air defense differentiation. There were also attacks on the Kerch Strait. In videos, we can see drones being shot down. Here we see one of the drones flying, which is then hit directly and destroyed. In the next video right behind it, we see another drone that disappears without visibly being shot down. And shortly after, we see an explosion that may have come from an impact. Here is another drone on its way. Another impact. And in the last video, we can see how one of the people filming is counting. 1, 2, 3, 3 burning ships that are recorded here. He counts at least 3 burning ships, which means at least 3 ships were set on fire here. Ukrainian forces also say they destroyed the air defense systems at the Kerch Bridge, which means it no longer has any air defense. Interestingly, Russian mill blogger Fater Bomber is currently being blamed for the attacks. He reported that fuel had arrived, and the Ukrainians are making sure to loudly thank him for it. Here with the meme, where the Ukrainian unmanned forces thank Fater Bomber for it and name him Employee of the Month. In case of doubt, of course, nothing happens. Or an influential Russian mill blogger gets arrested. Either way, the Ukrainians, of course, don't miss the chance to make a joke out of it. Reba, the most important Russian mill blogger, comments here, "The enemy is continuing its campaign to isolate Crimea and destroy its logistical stability." Although there have not yet been any attacks on the Crimean bridge itself, the surrounding infrastructure, ports, ferry connections, terminals, gas stations, and access roads to the Kerch Strait is being targeted. The intention behind this is completely clear. It is not absolutely necessary to bring down the bridge immediately. It is enough to paralyze the operation of the entire Kerch hub, to disrupt the transport of cargo, equipment, and supplies, and to make it more difficult to supply the Russian troops in the south. Like the previous ones, the current attack should not be seen as an isolated incident, but as part of systematic pressure on Crimea's transportation infrastructure network. The Crimean bridge, the ferry connection, and the related infrastructure are considered interconnected targets. The internet is also critical infrastructure, where many dangers lurk. Fortunately, today's sponsor can help here, to protect you from attacks. Please, in return, don't invade any neighboring countries, okay? Security isn't just important in geopolitics, but also on the internet. That's where a VPN helps. With CyberGhost VPN, today's sponsor, I can not only access websites encrypted and without logs, but also bypass the geo-blocking of 40 different streaming services. With just 2 clicks, you can select one of the over 100 countries that CyberGhost offers to unlock content blocked in your region. This also applies to the United Kingdom, which is why I choose probably the best documentaries ever, those from BBC. I can access them with CyberGhost. Of course, no logs are kept, so no one can track which sites you have visited. With CyberGhost, all your online activity is fully encrypted, so you basically enjoy complete privacy on the internet. With a subscription, I can connect up to 7 devices, including smart TVs and smartphones, and share access with friends and family. The software is very user-friendly and works on all common platforms without any technical knowledge required. If any problems do occur, support is available around the clock, and of course, also in German. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot speak for themselves, as do over 38 million users. If you use the link in the description, you get an 83% discount and 4 extra months for free. If you're not satisfied, there's a 45-day money-back guarantee. Reba also explains what the plan was. Since the middle of last year, Ukrainian forces have deliberately started to disrupt the maritime route between Crimea and the Krasnodar region. Systematic drone attacks have targeted port infrastructure and industry. The goal was to disrupt trade and shipping. Although this did not lead to the collapse of the entire maritime logistics system, but the combination of attacks by unmanned boats on tankers and later drone attacks on ships in the Sea of Azov caused numerous problems, in the form of rising freight costs, higher insurance premiums, and a decrease in the number of ships willing to call at ports of the Russian Federation in this region. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces systematically attacked oil depots and transshipment points in Crimea and on the coast of the Krasnodar region. The city of Feodosia was attacked with drones for months, and facilities in the Kuban region are still regularly subjected to attacks to this day. This led to the storage of fuel on the peninsula becoming practically impossible due to the constant threat of attacks, and Crimea became even more dependent on external supplies. When the sea route became more difficult and Crimea's own fuel supplies, which were not very large, ran low, the Ukrainian armed forces began to attack the land corridor with medium-range drones, leading to massive supply disruptions on the peninsula. At the same time, the enemy actively attacked the railway infrastructure both in Crimea and in Novorossiya, which regularly affected rail traffic. You can see footage of recent attacks and their aftermath in the background here. Here, for example, we can see one of these security vehicles standing there next to the wreckage. The equipment here is a machine gun, a rifle, which was supposed to be used to fight off drones, but obviously that didn't work out. The consequence of these attacks is that Crimea is now without gasoline, without electricity, and without water. All public fuel distribution in Crimea has been suspended. In addition, government services, the only exceptions are government and emergency services. They are still allowed to refuel, and because of the attacks, the power has gone out, and electricity is necessary for the water supply, for pumping, so that has also failed for the moment. Ferry operations across the Kerch Strait have been suspended at this time, and truck drivers are supposed to use the Novorossiya highway on the land bridge. So that's in the south of the occupied Ukraine, where exactly these recordings were made that I just showed you. At least partially, other supplies have also failed. This is being reported in various places. Riba is now also concerned about the Kerch bridge itself. It's possible that initial waves of drones could overwhelm air defenses. Since drones can likely only damage the roadway, they'd need to attack repeatedly to keep it damaged. Now, the quote here, even more dangerous in an attack on a bridge is the use of flamingo missiles, whose warhead weighs up to 1,000 kilograms. The production of these missiles for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces is taking place across Europe, which has allowed stockpiles of up to 1,000 of the 60 operational Flamingo missiles to be built up. They assume that Ukraine has at least 60 of them. The prospects, according to Riba, are not good. Given the logistical problems that have occurred on the peninsula, it would be naive not to expect an intensification of attacks by Ukrainian units. And the coming weeks will probably be crucial with regard to the opponent's further actions. The Ukrainian armed forces have the necessary means. There will be both drone attacks and attempts with concentrated force. Flamingo rockets are the largest Flamingo rockets. The Flamingo rockets are the largest Flamingo. The Flamingo largest Flamingo rockets. Largest Flamingo rockets in the world. They are a type of shot. Flamingo rockets trigger. Rockets, Flamingo rockets, trigger more. Kilograms triggered by Flamingo. Ukrainians support Ukraine. Ukrainians are for Ukraine. They expect landings in Crimea and efforts to block the Flamingo rockets, which are the largest and most significant in the world, according to a Russian mill blogger. But that's not all. The Russian mill bloggers are also worried about Belarus. Zelensky has called on Belarus to remove the repeaters within a week, which the Russians are supposed to be using for active control of their Shahed drones. According to the Ukrainian president, these are located inside Belarus. If Belarus does not remove them, they will remove them themselves. Of course, this suggests that a military action in Belarus can be expected from the Ukrainian armed forces. Russian mill bloggers are taking this seriously and expecting an attack. Here's a statement from Yuri Kotnok. I strongly doubt that the Ukrainians will have the audacity to advance against the Belarusians with soldiers. Although in this world, nothing can be ruled out with 100% certainty. Rather, they will try to carry out missile and drone attacks. Ukraine will strike with drones and cripple factories, military units, civil society, and civilian infrastructure. They will mainly imitate their actions in the Russian border regions, in the areas of Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk, Voronezh, and others, in Krasnodar Krai, and in Crimea. Among those threatened by the attacks is the largest oil refinery in Mozir. Because of its proximity, just a few dozen kilometers from the border, it is an attractive target for the enemy's drones. With the attacks from Kiev and the likely response of the Belarusian army, the risk of involvement of the Poles and the contingents on the territory of the Baltic dwarf states in the conflict increases drastically. I consider the likelihood of provocations and attempts to attack the Belarusians by Poland and the dwarf states to be very high. They have already deployed the necessary forces and resources for this under the guise of the Summer Maneuvers 2026. In addition, the Poles have gradually moved their armed forces to the border with Belarus. Currently, they have concentrated several infantry and tank brigades near Brest. Yuri Kotenok believes that all of this will lead to the involvement of NATO countries, which would attack Belarus. But of course, Igor Girkin also doesn't miss the chance to comment on this. Zelensky's threats against Belarus are quite concrete and have serious grounds. It's no secret that Belarus is, of course, a gateway through which we receive a certain amount of sanctioned goods. These are also extremely important for us. And especially now, as our refineries are being destroyed one after another by enemy drones, the Belarusian refineries are of particular value to us. And finally, if we were to lose Belarus, we would at least permanently lose the visible connection to the Kaliningrad region. Accordingly, our strategic position on the Western Front would deteriorate. That's why I think it's very likely that Ukraine could launch an attack on Belarusian territory, especially since they might assume that there won't be an adequate response to such an attack. At the very least, they can suspect that. First and foremost, of course, again, against the Belarusian oil refinery, and of course they can also attack relay stations and military bases. They could attack anything. So, from the Russian side, they believed that Ukraine would dare to do it, and they are by no means acting as if this is a decision for which Ukraine would have to pay a high price, but rather as if it could actually make sense for Ukraine, especially since this could draw other states on Ukraine's side into the war. This is the current situation with, once again, wild statements from Russian mill bloggers, which we have analyzed here today in the Situation Report. Once again, thank you to CyberGhost for supporting us with this ad. If you also want to surf the internet securely with a VPN, click the link in the description and get 83% off plus 4 months free. If you found it interesting, please give it a thumbs up. Leave your comment, and if you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all from Torsten Heinrich for now. Thank you for your attention and see you soon. Many thanks also to the supporters on YouTube as well as here on Patreon. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Mahamori and to the Lieutenants Finn, Fünfab, Plektan, Jans vom Eck, Uwe de Vreen, Nickname to by Pay, Carsten Schulz, Tequila 42, Immelkopf, Pate, Floja, Capri, Beartainment, Lichtshatter, NTX, Malermeister, Nagel, Markus F., Alex Rosenthal, Matt Best, Sig Rider, Möter, Janis Gu, Sascha Müller, Cunningham, Euch Stress. Thank you very much. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.